Good morning. Americans have had enough of Joe Biden and far-left Democrats' anti-American energy policies. Since his first day in office, Joe Biden has destroyed American energy independence. He canceled the Keystone Pipeline, killing thousands of jobs, and launched an unprecedented war on American energy. Joe Biden has forced America to rely on foreign adversaries like Russia and Iran, and left American families to foot the bill for skyrocketing energy costs due to this unwanted far-left agenda. From the gas station to the grocery store, American families are hurting. Gas prices are once again on the rise, and in my district in upstate New York, which relies heavily on home heating oil, sky-high utility and heating costs are crushing families, increasing by over 80% in the last 3 years. Joe Biden created this energy crisis, and the American people know it. Republicans know that we need to unleash American energy, not restrict it. It's vital that we ensure America's energy dominance and provide true energy security. That is what we are focused on for Energy Week in the House. We've seen it firsthand. Under the pro-American energy policies of President Donald Trump, we were the world energy leader. Our nation thrived because of the pro-national security, pro-American job energy agenda that lowered cost and prioritized domestic production. Today, we are joined by our colleagues, Congressman Dan Newhouse, who is leading the resolution denouncing all of the anti-American energy policies of Joe Biden. And we also have Congresswoman Diana Harshbarger, whose work on House Energy and Commerce Committee is fighting back against these anti-American energy proposals from Joe Biden. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Diana.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Elise, for affording me the opportunity to address this critical issue. You know, when it comes to wreaking havoc on an economy while inadvertently bolstering our adversaries like Iran and Russia, nobody seems to have mastered the art quite like President Biden. From day one of his presidency, he waged a relentless assault on American energy. His first act, the termination of the Keystone XL pipeline. And through a barrage of executive actions and detrimental regulations, he's systemically dismantling our energy sector, driving our economy deeper into peril. He's mortally wounded our strategic petroleum reserve, which is intended to be used for national security emergencies. And this is being drained at an unprecedented rate to compensate for the diminished supply resulting from Biden's myopic policies. Merely weeks ago, the Biden administration inflicted another blow by halting permit applications for liquefied natural gas exports. Not content with holding our LNG export permits hostage, his actions are now jeopardizing our allies, nudging our allies toward energy suppliers who stand in direct opposition to our interests, such as Russia and Iran. If there's one takeaway from what I say today, energy security is national security, and it's time the Biden administration prioritize the welfare of hard-working Americans over the demands of environmental activists. To achieve true energy independence, we've got to focus on four key priorities, and these are harnessing the abundant resources within our own borders, championing energy production on American soil, ensuring the efficiency and environmentally sound transportation of our energy through pipelines, and reclaiming our status as a net exporter of energy. House Republicans have taken decisive action by passing groundbreaking legislation aimed at boosting domestic energy production, implementing permitting reforms, and reversing Biden's anti-energy directives. The House has done their job by passing H.R. 1, the Lower Energy Cost Act. It's time for the White House and the Senate to do their job and provide American families with the relief they urgently require. So with that, I will turn it over to Dan Newhouse from the great state of Washington. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Diana. Good morning, everybody. It's no secret that since day one in the White House, President Biden has consistently made energy decisions based on the agendas of the extreme climate lobby. His administration has consistently proposed and finalized regulations that increase the cost of energy for consumers, punish domestic producers, and increase reliance on our adversaries for our energy needs. You know, as a third-generation farmer, I hear every day the challenges that just our sector alone is dealing with. This administration has driven fuel prices so high compromising farmers' ability to operate profitably and at capacity. This is draining not only the budgets of farms across our country, it is snowballing into damaging domestic food supply chains. As chairman of the Congressional Western Caucus, I hear from people across the country that are literally cutting their grocery spending to help pay for their energy bills. Everyone from small businesses to single-family households, all family households, are strained by this administration's out-of-touch policies that seem to have no end. So I'm proud to bring this resolution number 987 forward to help denounce these policies for their unnecessary and unprecedented war on our American energy. Now's the time for common sense solutions to the disaster that they have led us to. I want to thank Speaker Johnson, Leader Scalise, Whip Emmer, Chairwoman Stefanik for championing this issue. And now I'm proud to turn the microphone over to our Whip, Mr. Tom Emmer.
Thanks, Dan. As you already heard from our colleagues, this week is Energy Week in the House. After 3 years of Joe Biden's war on American energy, here we are. The House Republicans are once again fighting against the Biden administration's radical climate agenda by bringing 6 common sense energy bills to the floor. The core tenets of these bills are simple. It's all about restoring American energy dominance, lowering costs for families, and counteracting the Biden administration's detrimental Green New Deal agenda. By canceling the Keystone XL pipeline on his first day in office, Joe Biden made it clear that he cares more about appeasing the far left members of his party than protecting American jobs and American energy. His anti-American energy antics continued with decisions to halt approval of liquefied natural gas exports and to drain our strategic petroleum reserve. What have been the results? Americans are paying 45% more for gas and 28% more for electricity. Plus, our strategic petroleum reserve is at its lowest levels in 4 decades. We must and we will stand for America's energy independence and American workers and their families. The question is, will Democrats join us? With that, I turn it over to our Majority Leader, Steve Scalise.
Thank you, Whip. This is Energy Week in the House, and House Republicans continue to bring a number of bills to the House floor that are focused on lowering energy costs for America, standing up for American energy, and standing up against the radical extreme policies of Joe Biden that threaten to shut off American energy. And again, interestingly, if you look at Joe Biden's policies over and over again since he became president, as Diana Harshbarger talked about, day one, attacking the Keystone Pipeline, killing thousands of jobs in America. But then he approved a Russian pipeline. You've seen him over and over again killing permits, killing other projects here in America, and then getting on Air Force One and flying to Saudi Arabia and begging them to produce more energy. Empowering Vladimir Putin. If you just look at the LNG export ban that the president put in place, it hurts American energy dramatically. Really crushes our ability to supply liquefied natural gas to our allies in places like Europe. And so what does that mean? Europe still needs natural gas. And all it means is now they have to get it from countries like Russia. Why would Joe Biden want to continue to empower Vladimir Putin and fund Putin's war machine, which he's using against Ukraine? Joe Biden is helping Vladimir Putin fund the war effort against Ukraine when he crushes American energy. But we're going to continue to bring these bills to the floor. The Dan Newhouse resolution goes through item by item, dozens of specific actions taken by Joe Biden, listing the dates if you want to walk down memory lane and see exactly what Joe Biden's done since his very first day in office to attack American energy. That resolution lists all of those specific things. And look, the people paying the price for this are middle and low income families here in the United States, paying dramatically higher costs at the pump and paying higher costs for household utilities. So we're going to continue standing up for those families. And we're also going to continue standing by our ally, Israel. You saw over the weekend this leadership team spoke very strongly against Chuck Schumer's comments when he tried to undermine the democratically elected leadership of Israel at a time of war, when Israel is fighting for their very existence and working to eviscerate Hamas after the October 7th attacks. And you see Joe Biden standing right there with Chuck Schumer, continuing to work to undermine Israel's elected leadership, continuing to do things like calling for a ceasefire. Well, Hamas ended the ceasefire on October 7th. You hear Joe Biden talking about a two-state solution. When Joe Biden talks about a two-state solution, seems like the only thing that he's really interested in are Michigan and Nevada. And I think people are fed up with that. Just because his politics are bad here at home doesn't mean you go and undermine one of your strongest allies in the world, especially in a time of war. This is a time we should all be standing by Israel. You've seen this leadership team stand strongly with our friends in Israel in their right to defend themselves, and we will not waver, regardless of what Chuck Schumer or Joe Biden continue to do. With that, a man who's been leading that charge, our Speaker, Mike Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Thank you all for being here. Good morning. I'm glad you began with Israel. I had a lengthy conversation this morning with Prime Minister Netanyahu and reiterated to him the House Republicans' strong support for Israel and their efforts there, and expressed my strong, my strong disagreement with Leader Schumer about what he said last week, and that's been well covered. I won't relitigate it here, but we think it is not only foolhardy, it's dangerous for him to be trying to suggest how Israel should run its domestic affairs in the midst of their conflict. So you'll see the House Republicans continue to stand forward and reiterate our support for Israel at this very critical time. But this is Energy Week in the House, and we're happy to bring that theme to the House because it's very, very important, as you've heard. I began Energy Week in a perfect place in Midland, Texas, with Congressman August Pfluger there. That's his district. We were on a great oil rig in the Permian Basin on Monday, got our hands dirty out there and talked with the workers and the people who work around the clock to supply America's energy needs. And that's a critically important thing to our country. And it's something that the White House seems not to know anything about. House Republicans know the value of American energy, but President Biden obviously does not. And it's such a stark contrast. I think about this all the time. Compare the Trump administration with the Biden administration. I was here as a freshman in 2017, and we had not begun the Congress, but just maybe a few weeks into it. And President Trump came to visit the House Republican Conference. And I remember so vividly when he began to talk about American energy, which was a main theme for him, as you know, in his campaign and in his administration. And he said, we don't want to talk about energy independence anymore. We want American energy independence. We want to talk about American energy dominance. And he introduced the term, and we applauded, and he achieved it. We were a net exporter, of course, of energy just after the first 2 years of that administration, and that continued. And then Joe Biden came to office. And as it was noted, just on the first day in the Oval Office, he began to wage war on our own energy industry and its producers. And so you heard they killed the Keystone XL pipeline, and he demonized domestic energy producers, the people who are providing the jobs in the energy and the national security for us. He depleted our strategic petroleum reserve and sold it off to China. He placed an effective ban on new LNG export terminals. I'm not even sure he fully understands the implications of some of the executive orders that he's written, but this is what's happened, and we all see the effects. And so we're expecting to see the administration finalize now its misguided electric vehicle mandate. It will decimate the auto industry, and it will hamstring consumers. That rule is going to target gas-powered vehicles, which we all need. It's going to force us to rely on communist China for critical minerals to produce all these things, and it's going to make American consumers pay more at a time when they can least afford it. And this is a perfect example of this administration's approach to energy. More regulations, higher cost. That's what they're for. And they keep proving that over and over and over. House Republicans are committed to protecting American jobs, to unleashing American energy dominance again, to reducing cost and helping our allies, and of course, reducing emissions. This week, House Republicans will pass the legislation promoting American energy independence and opposing Biden's anti-energy agenda. There's no other way to describe it. Our bills, as you've heard, are going to support fracking. They're going to expedite permitting processes. We're going to decrease fees on oil and gas producers. And of course, we will continue to denounce President Biden's radical policies. This is a continuation of the pro-American energy agenda that House Republicans have been pursuing and will always pursue. We passed H.R. 1, our signature piece of legislation, right out of the blocks, the Lower Energy Cost Act. And that legislation was to support our LNG producers and protect gas-powered vehicles. So this is very clear. The White House is more eager to appease radical environmental activists than the American people. There's no other way to assess this. And House Republicans will stand with American energy and producers for lower energy costs for Americans. And Democrats simply cannot say the same thing. That's the contrast. Americans see it, and we will be reiterating that theme over and over. And with that, I'll take your questions. Second row, right?
Mr. Speaker, you took over at a very difficult time and in difficult circumstances. What has been your guiding principle for leading Congress at this time, and are there any lessons you can share that you've learned?
That's great. Let's talk about that for about an hour. No, we have learned a lot of lessons. What we're doing right now is unprecedented. There's never been a change of a speaker mid-course in the history of Congress. And we did it at the time where we have the smallest majority in U.S. history. Almost literally. There was the 65th Congress in 1917 during World War I, before women had the right to vote, when they had a 0.43% margin. Ours is, by next week, will be 1.16%. That's the math. So one vote. And yet we have to govern, and we have to demonstrate that we can keep this thing together and keep the train on the tracks, and we are. And by getting appropriations bills done, and by moving key pieces of legislation, and by keeping the team together, we've demonstrated that. How do we stay focused? How do we do that? To me, it boils down to adhering and holding fast to our foundational principles. There is a move afoot to change the foundational principles of America, the things that made us the great, extraordinary, most successful, most powerful, most benevolent nation, most free nation in the history of the world. It's not even close. And the reason is, I boil it down, y'all have probably heard me say before, I call it the 7 core principles of American conservatism, but it's really the 7 core principles of America itself. And I think it's individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, human dignity. I mean, those are the fixed points in the horizon. I grew up in Louisiana, so everything's explained in either a football or a hurricane metaphor, okay? In the hurricane metaphor, when you're in choppy seas and you're in uncharted waters, as we are, dark skies on the horizon, all of that, you have to know where the fixed points in the horizon are. Those are our fixed points. And so what I try to do every day is make sure we're still anchored to that we're not adrift out on the sea. And I think that's going to serve us well. Ronald Reagan said in his farewell address, he said, they call me the great communicator. I really wasn't. I paraphrase him, but he said, I was simply communicating great things, and they're the same great things that have guided our nation since its founding. The great things don't change, and we are now the stewards of them. All of us, really, every citizen, but certainly elected representatives in Congress, and that's what we try to adhere to. That's what we try to advance, and I think that's what's going to save the republic. So, Jake?
Could you give us your updated view on the foreign aid situation and what your plans are?
Yeah, so we've been very, very consistent, very adamant that we had to get our government funded. We had to get the appropriations process done. I'm delighted to tell you we're coming to the end of that, and we should have the bill text hopefully by this afternoon, and begin to finish up that process. This is the second batch of bills. It includes the Department of Defense bill, as you know, Labor H, Ledge Branch, FSGG, SFOPS, and Homeland. That last piece, the Homeland piece, was the most difficult to negotiate because the two parties have a wide chasm between them, as you know. But I think the final product is something that we were able to achieve a lot of key provisions in and wins, and a move in the direction that we want, even with our tiny, historically small majority. There was some very tough negotiation. But that having come to an end now, the attention, as I've said all along, will turn to the supplemental issues, and there's a number of avenues that we've been looking at to address that. And I'm not going to say today what that is, but just want you to know that work has been done deliberately along the way. But we had to get the approps done first, and having done that now, we'll turn our attention to it, and we won't delay on that. Yeah, back row, and now I'll go here, back row.
What do you make of the former president's comments saying that Jews who vote for Democrats hate Israel and their religion? He doubled down on those as well.
I don't speak for President Trump, but I understand the sentiment that he's trying to express. I mean, if you look at the voting records, look at the Israel funding. We talked about the supplemental. I've tried on 2 different occasions to push the Israel, funding request through. We did it with a pay-for initially, right out of the blocks, right after I became Speaker, and then we did a clean Israel bill, and the president issued a veto threat over that. I was stunned. I actually couldn't believe that he did that, and that peeled off. I think it was 160 plus Democrats voted against funding for Israel at the time where they're fighting for their very existence and need it so desperately. And so I think people interpret that, for what it is. I think the facts speak for themselves. I think you see the House Republicans and the Republican Party at large, and President Trump for that matter, standing strong with Israel, and you see an increasingly large number of Democrats and a big faction of the Democratic Party who are standing against Israel openly. They're saying the quiet parts out loud, and to us that's alarming. I think it's shameful, and I think that's what President Trump's referring to. And his language is his language, but I think that's a sentiment that most of the American people understand, and that's how they interpret it. Front row.
Last question. Thanks, Johnson. You mentioned you're considering several possible avenues when it comes to providing additional aid to Ukraine. One thing that is being floated by some Republicans is that they're pushing this idea, if you're going to provide additional aid to Ukraine, do it in the form of a loan. Is that something that is on the table? Is that something that you would support?
Well, I've not specifically talked about the mechanism of funding Ukraine. We're talking about the whole supplemental and all these pieces, whether they would go individually or as a package. All those things are being debated and discussed. And internally, I think there is a big distinction in the minds of a lot of people between lethal aid for Ukraine and the humanitarian component. There's talk about what we call the Repo Act that you all know, where you could use the seized assets of Russian oligarchs in some manner to pay for the support of Ukraine, and then the loan concept is being discussed. So there's a lot of thoughtful, deliberate work and discussion going on amongst subsets of members about all that. Look, we understand the role that America plays in the world. We understand the importance of sending a strong signal to the world that we stand by our allies, and we cannot allow terrorists and tyrants to march through the globe. You unsettle the world order since World War II if America is not projecting strength. And I'll say this again, and you hear me say this a lot, but I'm deeply concerned that this White House and this president are projecting weakness on the world stage. And I believe that is the reason that so many of our adversaries are acting so provocatively. And I think that's something that should concern every single American. And I don't care what political party you're in. We maintain peace through strength. It's one of our guiding foundational principles, and Ronald Reagan used to talk about it all the time, and I still believe it. Most of us do. We have to project strength on the world stage, and we're going to do that. We'll meet our obligations, and we'll turn to that immediately as soon as the approps are over. So thank you all. Thank